clay jar sits by the curb in the dim light before dawn. Not a pretty jar, not a holy jar, just a jar for pee. In Rome, in the 1st and 2nd centuries after Christ, people saved urine. They didn't save it because they liked it. They saved it because it was useful. Old urine turns sharp. It makes a strong cleaner. It can help lift stains. It can help bleach cloth. And yes, people even linked it with white teeth. A Roman poet named Catullus joked about bright teeth and urine long before this time, in the late Republic. He teases a man named Ignatius, saying his teeth look so polished that it's like he must have used urine. It's a joke, but it only works if the idea feels real to his readers. In a city like Rome, the useful things often came from the least lovely places. The city did not run on clean hands and sweet air. It ran on work, on smoke, on sweat, on water carried in jars, on bread baked fast, on waste carried out, and that is where we begin. Not in a marble hall, not on a battlefield, but on an ordinary street with an ordinary jar waiting to be collected. Somewhere nearby, a man is already awake. He works with cloth. He works with stains. He works with smells. Romans call him a fuller. In Latin, a fullo. Fullers are laundry workers. They clean tunics. They clean cloaks. They clean wool. They clean the heavy folds of a toga, if the owner can pay. Urine matters to them. It is one of their tools, the way soap is a tool to us. People don't always love the fullers for it, but they still bring them dirty clothes. In some places, you can still see the marks of this job. At Pompeii, which was buried in the year 79, there were fullers' shops, big tubs, workspaces, places where cloth was treated, scrubbed and finished. Not quiet places, busy places. In Rome itself, we don't have the whole city frozen in time, but we know the trade was there. We know the need was there. A city of this size makes a lot of laundry. How big was Rome? Historians still argue about exact numbers, but many estimates put it around 1 million people in the early empire, give or take. Pause. That number is hard to hold in your mind in the dark, so let's make it simpler. It was the biggest city most people in the empire would ever hear about. It pulled food, water, stone, wood, oil, and people into itself every day. It was always hungry, and it was loud, even when it tried to sleep. Wheels on stone, sandals on steps, a dog barking in a courtyard, a baby crying through a thin wall, a cough, a laugh, a shout from a late tavern. We are going to spend time with the people who lived inside that noise. Not the senators in their grand homes, not the generals on their days of glory. Ordinary people. And ordinary in Rome is a wide word. It can mean a slave, owned by someone else, doing the work that keeps a house running. It can mean a freed person, once enslaved, now paid for their labor, still tied to old bonds. It can mean a porter carrying loads through crowded lanes. It can mean a cook, a barber, a candle maker, a shop clerk, a mason, a baker. It can mean a woman selling cloth, a child sent on errands, a man renting a bed for a single night. It can also mean someone who has just enough, a room, a job, a bowl of porridge, a little oil for a lamp. In the 1st and 2nd centuries, Rome is not one neat place. It is many little worlds stacked close together. Some people live in a domus, a single-family house, often with an inner court and a small garden. But most people do not. Pause. Most city folk live in apartment blocks. The Romans call these insulae, islands like blocks of stone and brick rising out of the street. In an insula, the ground floor often holds shops, a bread stall, a wine shop, a place selling lamps, a corner where a man repairs sandals. Above the shops, people live, rooms stacked over rooms. The higher you go, the cheaper it tends to be. More steps, less space, more heat in summer, more cold in winter. In some buildings there is water nearby, at a fountain down the street. In some, there's a shared latrine. In some, there is neither. Life depends on what you can pay, what you can carry, and what you can tolerate. And through all of this, the city makes systems to handle what every living thing makes. Waste, ash, broken pottery, spoiled food, dirty water. Some waste goes into pits, some goes into drains, some ends up in the street until someone clears it. Rome has sewers in places, famous ones. But a sewer is not magic. A sewer is a tunnel for dirty water, and it still needs care. A lot of care. So people do what people always do. They reuse, they sell, they turn scraps into something worth money. That is why the urine jar sits by the curb. It is part of a small economy. Someone will come by and collect it. Someone will sell it. Someone will buy it. A fuller maybe. A tanner maybe. Someone who needs ammonia to clean and treat cloth. And the state notices this, because the state notices most things that make money. There is a famous story about an emperor named Vespasian, who ruled from AD 69 to 79. He is said to have taxed the trade in collected urine. His son Titus didn't like the idea. It sounded low, it sounded dirty. So the story goes, Vespasian held up a coin and asked if it smelled. When Titus said no, Vespasian replied that it came from urine anyway. Money does not stink. We don't know every detail of how that tax worked day to day. Ancient stories often get polished in the telling, but the point stands. Even waste could be valuable in Rome. Now, let's widen our view. Let's step back from the jar. Let's look down the street. The street is narrow. Tall walls rise on both sides. Some walls are bare brick. Some are plastered and painted. The paint chips, the plaster cracks. A sign hangs over a shop front, swinging a little in the night air. There are stones set in the road. The road itself is hard and worn. Some places are slick, polished by feet and wheels. Some places are rough, patched, uneven. Rome is built and rebuilt. It is always being fixed. A fire takes a block. A landlord rebuilds quick and cheap. A wall leans. A beam sags. A new beam is shoved into place. Writers complain about this. They warn about buildings that collapse or burn. Sometimes they are being dramatic. Sometimes they are not. In a dense city, danger is part of the background, like the sound of carts. But the people inside these buildings still make them home. A pot on a shelf. A cup hung on a nail. A little charm by the door. A blanket folded in the corner. A lamp that's used sparingly because oil costs money. When you think of Rome, it's easy to picture bright marble. But marble is not the whole city. Most walls are not marble. Most hands are not soft. A Roman writer named Pliny the Elder lived in the 1st century. He wrote a huge book called Natural History. He was curious about almost everything. Stones, animals, plants, medicines, odd habits, things people said worked, things that probably didn't. Pliny is not a poor man. His voice is educated. He is part of the learned world, so we have to be careful with him. But he gives us a sense of what Romans noticed, what they collected, what they tried, even small daily things. And daily things are what we're after tonight. Not the polished speeches, not the triumphs, the slow rhythm, the human pace. Imagine the city as layers. At street level, a shop opens early. A baker is already up. The oven has to be hot before sunrise. Grain has to be ground. Dough has to be shaped. Bread has to be ready before people head to work. The smell of baking will drift through the lanes. It mixes with other smells. Smoke from charcoal. Fish sauce from a jar. Old wine spilled by the door of a tavern. Wet wool. A stable nearby. And here and there, the sharp edge of ammonia from a fuller's place. Overhead, you might see a small strip of sky, not wide, just enough to show that the night is thinning. Maybe you hear a call from an upper window, someone asking for water, someone warning a child not to lean out too far. In many parts of Rome, people get water from public fountains. They carry it in jars. They balance it on hips, on shoulders, on carts. Water shapes the day. It decides what can be cooked, what can be washed, what can be cleaned. Fire does the same. Most people don't have a big, safe kitchen. They have a brazier, a small fire pot, a risky flame near wood and cloth. So cooking can happen in small ways, or in shared places, or in street stalls. That means the street is not just a path. It is part of the home. It is where you buy food, where you hear news, where you see who's back in town, where you learn which landlord is raising rent, where you find out who is sick. Rome is also full of movement from far away. Ships come up the coast. Goods come in from across the sea. Oil from Spain. Wine from many places. Grain from North Africa and Egypt. Marble from Greece. People, too, from everywhere. In this period, Rome is the center of an empire that wraps around the Mediterranean. Not everyone feels that power the same way, but the city's markets and docks do. They are where the empire becomes real. In a sack of grain, in a crate of lamps, in a bundle of cloth. And yet, the life we're following is small. A person in a rented room does not wake thinking about the whole empire. They wake thinking about today, the price of bread, the ache in a shoulder, the cough that won't leave, the boss who will dock pay if you're late. Rome has rich people. It has very rich people. But most people live close to the edge. One bad week can tip them. A lost job, a fever, a broken tool, a fire in the block. Still, there is a kind of steadiness too, because routines hold things together. You go to the same fountain. You buy from the same stall. You greet the same neighbors on the stairs. You learn which stones are loose in the road, which corner smells the worst after rain. The urine jar is part of that routine. It is not a joke to the fuller. It is a supply. It is what keeps cloth bright, what keeps a business running. And cloth matters. Cloth is expensive to make. It takes wool, time, skill. It takes spinning, weaving, cutting, sewing. A good cloak is not thrown away lightly. It is cleaned. It is mended. It is passed on. So the fuller's work matters in a city where appearance can shape your chances. A clean tunic helps you look ready for work. A neat cloak helps you look like you belong in a certain place. A bright toga, for those who wear them, helps you look proper in public. Even people with little money care about these things, not for pride alone, but because life is social. Your neighbors see you. Your boss sees you. The person you hope will hire you sees you. And in Rome, being seen is part of survival. Now, we won't stay with urine for long. It's only our doorway, a small odd fact that tells us something larger. That Rome was practical. That Rome reused what it could. That Rome's daily life was close to the body, close to dirt, close to work. If you are listening in bed, you don't need to hold on tightly to every detail. Just let the city come into focus, one quiet piece at a time. The jar, the street stones, the tall walls, the hint of bread in the air, a shutter creaking open, a footstep on stairs. In a moment the light will grow, the sounds will change, and Rome will feel less like an idea and more like a place you can walk through slowly. So now let's move deeper into the city. Let's notice its shapes, its sounds, its small corners, and let the world of Rome settle around us. The first grey light reaches a public fountain, not the grand kind with statues, just a steady spout into a stone bowl. A woman comes with a clay jar, then another. Someone shifts a load on a wooden yoke. The line is quiet, not friendly, not unfriendly, just awake. In Rome, water is everywhere in stories, but in real life, it's often carried, lifted, balanced, spilled a little on the walk home. You can picture the aqueducts far out in the countryside, like long stone bridges. But here, inside the city, water shows up in simple places. A street corner, a basin, a wet patch on the stones. A Roman official named Sextus Julius Frontinus wrote about Rome's water in the late 1st century. He had a careful mind. He liked numbers. He counted public basins, and he wrote down how the water was meant to be shared. That doesn't mean every street had clean, easy access, but it tells us something plain. The city tried to make water part of public life, not private, not hidden, right out in the open. So early in the morning, before the heat, before the crush of the day, people come to fetch it. They talk in low voices, or they don't talk at all. They listen for the sound of the stream. They watch the jar fill. Behind them, the city is still half asleep, but it never fully stops. Somewhere deeper in the lanes, a cartwheel squeaks. A mule stamps. A man mutters as he pulls a load over a patch of rough stone. Rome had rules about wheel traffic in the daytime. The idea was to keep the streets from choking, to keep heavy wagons from grinding through crowds when the city was most full. How well it worked, we don't know for sure. Rome was good at laws, less perfect at enforcing them everywhere all the time. Still, the feeling is easy to imagine. In the daylight, the lanes belong to feet, to sandals and bare soles, to quick steps and slow ones, to people carrying baskets, boards, jugs, babies. Look down at the street itself. The stones aren't smooth like a floor. They're worn, but uneven. Some are set like teeth. Some have shifted. In places you can see ruts cut by years of wheels. Here and there, stepping stones rise above the road. Little islands of stone you can hop across when the street is wet or dirty, or both. A man who knows the neighborhood walks them without thinking. A newcomer hesitates, then follows. The walls on either side are tall, often taller than you'd like. They block the wind. They hold the heat. They make the sky into a narrow ribbon overhead. These are the insulae, apartment blocks. A lot of Rome lives in them. At street level, you see shop fronts, a wide opening, like a mouth, with a wooden shutter. Sometimes the shutter folds down and becomes a counter. Sometimes it closes tight at night, like a lid. In one shop, a lamp is already burning. A baker's place maybe, or a wine shop rinsing cups from last night, or a small store where a man sells hot chickpeas, ladled from a pot. The smell is earthy and warm. Above the shops, you see small windows. Some have cloth hanging in them. Some have nothing at all. A few have wooden shutters, cracked open like sleepy eyes. The higher floors tend to be cheaper. more stairs, less space, more sway in the wind, more heat in summer, more cold in winter. A landlord may promise repairs, then forget. But inside those rooms, people still build a life. A shelf for bowls, a peg for a cloak, a basket for bread, a little charm hung near a door, a small thing that says, quietly, "This is ours." Now, breathe in the city air for a moment. Not deep, just enough to notice. Smoke is almost always there, from charcoal, from ovens, from lamps, from small fires trying to do a big job. And food smells are everywhere. Bread, yes. Also fish sauce, sharp and salty, used the way we use salt. Garlic on a knife. Oil warming in a pan. Wine spilled on stone. You might also smell damp wool, wet leather. A stable tucked behind a gate. A pile of broken pottery. And sometimes, faintly, the sting of strong cleaner from a fuller's shop. Rome is not one scent, it is layers, and the layers change as you walk. Now let's turn a corner. A wider street opens up, not wide like a modern road, just wider than a lane. Here, the sound changes. More voices, more feet. A seller calling out the same words again and again, with the patience of someone who knows the day is long. You see people of all kinds, close together. A slave hurrying with a bundle. A freedman in a neat tunic, trying to look steady. A porter with a strap across his chest, moving a load that looks heavier than it should. A child running an errand too fast, almost slipping on the stones. And mixed in with them, signs of wealth. A doorway with carved stone. A doorkeeper standing still. A glimpse inside where the light looks softer and the floor looks cleaner. In Rome, rich and poor can live near each other. Not because life is fair, because the city is crowded, because being near the center matters, because the streets twist and the map is a tangle. If you keep walking, you start to notice public buildings that pull people in. One of the biggest pulls is the bathhouse. Pause. The baths are not only for the rich. They are used by many kinds of people. Not everyone goes every day. Not everyone can. But the baths are common enough that they shape the rhythm of the city. Think of the baths as a kind of warm pause in the day. A place with steam. A place with echoes. A place where you can sit and let the dust of the street leave your skin. A bather might bring a small kit, a little oil, a scraping tool called a strigil, used to scrape off oil and grime, a towel if they have one. If not, they make do. Inside there are rooms with different heat, warm, hot, cool again. The order can change, and it depends on the building. But the feeling is steady, stone underfoot, water on skin, voices bouncing off walls. You don't have to. Imagine it as a fancy spa. For many, it's practical. A way to wash without a private tub. A way to be warm in winter. A way to feel human again after work. Outside, the city keeps moving. Markets swell and shrink like breathing. People come in with baskets. They leave with bread, with olives, with a handful of something small, bought with small coins. The big flow of food into Rome is hard to picture from one street, but the effects are right here. You can buy bread almost anywhere. You can buy hot food from a stall if you don't have a safe place to cook. You can buy wine watered down for the day. And in the middle of all this, the ordinary work keeps the city alive. Sweeping, hauling, hammering, grinding grain, mending cloth, stitching leather. Sometimes you hear a sharp sound as a metal tool hits stone. Sometimes it's only the soft shuffle of sandals. Sometimes it's laughter that fades fast when someone turns a corner. If nights like these help you unwind, Subscribe for more quiet nights. Pause. Now, back to Rome. We're still in the morning light. The sun hasn't climbed high. Shadows still cling to doorways. But the city is fully awake now. A man leans out from an upper window. He shakes out a cloth. Dust falls in a thin curtain. Down below, someone steps aside without looking up. This happens every day. On a stairwell inside an insula, footsteps thump. Up, down, up again. Wood creaks. Someone coughs behind a thin wall. You begin to understand something simple. Rome is not a set of sights. It is a machine made of people. And each person has a small route. A fountain to a room to a shop to a job to a meal to a bath back to a room. And now, as the city settles into its day, we can follow one of those routes more closely. Not the grand roads, not the high politics, just a doorway, just a rented room. We'll climb the stairs, we'll step inside, and we'll see how a Roman morning begins. The room is dim, even after dawn. Light slips in through a small opening, high on the wall. It makes a pale stripe on the floor. The air is still. It holds old smoke from last night's lamp. It holds the faint smell of wool, cloth that has been worn and aired and worn again. Below, somewhere under this room, a wooden shutter scrapes. A shop is opening. You hear a latch, then a soft thud as it settles into place. Up here, the ceiling is close. Not low enough to make you duck, just low enough to make you feel the weight of the building. This is the sort of room many Romans knew. A rented space in an apartment block. Not a palace, not a ruin, just a place to sleep and keep a few things safe. There is bedding on the floor. A simple mattress, maybe stuffed with straw, or a thick blanket folded and refolded. A cloak can do the job too, if the night is mild. A small chest sits near the wall. It's scuffed. It has a worn strap. The sort of thing you can drag if you have to move. Fast. Rome has a way of making people ready to move. Rents change. Jobs change. Landlords argue. Stairs creak. A fire starts 2 streets over. You learn not to own too much. In the half light, a hand reaches for a lamp. A small clay lamp. It's shaped like a leaf or a shell, or just a shallow bowl with a lip. The wick is dark at the tip. Oil is not free, so the lamp is used the way you'd use a match in a storm. Briefly, carefully. A spark, a small flare, then a steady flame, no bigger than a thumb. The room warms in color, but not in heat. The floor is still cool under bare feet. Stone and brick hold on to the night. Sandals wait by the bedding. Leather straps, a little stiff from sweat and dust. They'll soften again by mid-morning. A tunic is pulled over the head. Wool, often. Sometimes linen, if it's hot, or if the person can pay. A belt ties it in at the waist. Clothing in Rome is not a closet full of choices. For many people, it's a small set of things. A tunic, a cloak, a spare piece of cloth, maybe an extra pair of sandals, if luck is kind. There's a sound in the stairwell. Footsteps, slow and heavy. Someone going down, or someone coming up. The walls are thin. In an insula, you learn your neighbors by their noises. One cough, one laugh, one child who wakes too early. A poet named Juvenal, writing around the early 2nd century, grumbles about city life like this. He talks about the crush of people, the noise, and how hard it can be to rest in Rome. He is a writer. He is shaping his words to make a point. But the picture still rings true. In a packed city, quiet is rare, so morning begins without a clean break. There is no perfect silence to leave behind. The day simply starts, like water leaking into a bowl. Now, water. In this room, there is no tap in the wall. Not for most people living above shops, so water is something you fetch, or buy, or borrow. A clay jug sits near the door. It holds what was carried up yesterday. Not much. Enough for hands, maybe. Enough for a face. A cloth is dipped in the jug. Cool water. A quick wipe across cheeks and eyes. Then hands, palms and fingers. Not a long wash, a careful one. The cloth is wrung out. Water is saved. It might be used again to wipe a bowl or to dampen a rag for the floor. In a world where water comes by the jar, you don't let it run away. Hair is smoothed with a comb. Combs show up in Roman finds, along with small tools for grooming. Some people use oil on hair and skin too, especially if they'll go to the baths later. If the person in this room is a man, he might want a clean shave. Styles shift over time. In the early empire, many men are shown clean-shaven in art, though not all. Barbers, called tonsors, are part of street life. A shave is not only about looks, it's about being ready in public. If the person is a woman, hair might be pinned up, or bound, or braided. Not a grand style every day. Just neat enough to work, neat enough to move. Now the room does one more small thing. It prepares food, or it decides not to. A brazier in a cramped room is risky. Smoke clings, sparks jump. So many people keep breakfast simple, or they buy it outside. The Roman breakfast had a name. Ientaculum, often small, often quick. Bread is common. Bread dipped in watered wine, or eaten with olives, or cheese, or fruit when it's in season. This is not a feast, it's a start. A bit of fuel before the long pull of the day. A heel of bread is broken. The sound is soft, like tearing cloth. A bite is taken slowly, not because there is time, but because chewing is quiet work. The mouth tastes yesterday's smoke, then bread, then salt, if there are olives, or a thin sharpness if the wine is cheap and sour. For some, breakfast is bought from a stall. A hot chickpea snack, a small piece of bread with something on it. Food you can eat while walking, because walking is part of life here. A poet named Martial, writing in the late 1st century, likes to show Rome up close. He writes about streets, clients and patrons, small meals, small rooms, and the daily scramble. Martial is funny and sharp and sometimes cruel in his jokes, so we don't take him as a perfect mirror, but he's useful for mood. He reminds us that Rome is made of mornings like this, not just monuments. Pause. Now, a few last checks before the door. A coin pouch is felt for, not counted out loud, just touched to be sure it's there. A key is checked if there is a lock worth locking. In many insulae, safety is a worry, so people learn habits. Don't leave good sandals near the stair. Don't leave a knife in plain sight. Don't trust a latch that's loose. The lamp is pinched out. Smoke curls up in a thin line. The room goes dim again. The door opens to the stairwell. The air out there is cooler. It smells like wood and dust and the breath of other lives. Step by step, down, past another door with a quiet murmur inside, past a spot where the plaster has fallen away, showing brick beneath. At the bottom, the street sound rises like a tide. A voice calling, a cup clinking, a cart somewhere farther off. And now our person is part of it. One body in the flow of Rome, moving toward work because work is waiting. In the next stretch of the day, we'll follow that pull. Into the shop, into the stall, into the dust and rhythm of ordinary labor. A shop shutter folds down into a counter. Wood on wood, a dull, familiar sound. A hand sets down a small coin. The coin is warm from a palm. The counter is cool. In Rome, work begins like this, not with trumpets, with shutters, with keys, with a broom on stone. A man steps out and sweeps the line where street meets shop. Dust, ash, bits of straw. He pushes it into a small pile. He lifts it with a flat shovel. He tosses it into a basket. Another shop opens, then another, and the street becomes a row of mouths waking up. A taberna is what Romans often call a street shop, a place that sells, a place that makes. Often both at once. Some tabernae are neat, some are cramped, some are little more than a dark hole with a counter, but they all share something. They face the street. They depend on the street. Inside you might see tools, plain and honest, a scale for weighing, a set of weights, a knife on a block, a hook on a beam, a basket for scraps. Work is not hidden here. It's part of the view. It makes noise. It makes smell. It makes the day feel like it's moving. Now, if you walk only a few blocks, you can pass many kinds of work. A shoemaker hunched over leather, a potter's yard with damp clay, a metal worker with a small fire, the air tasting faintly of hot iron, a barber with a chair near the door, talking while he trims. But to make this gentle and steady, we'll stay with one job for a while, a job that repeats, a job that gives a city one of its most basic comforts: bread. The baker's place is warm early, not because the sun is up, because the oven is already awake. You smell it before you see it. A dry heat, a sweet edge of grain, smoke that clings to the back of your throat. In a Roman bakery, the work can start in the dark. People want bread early. Workers want something to eat before they go to their own jobs. And bread takes time. Heat takes time. Hands take time. First comes grain. Not a romantic heap of golden wheat, just grain in a sack. Heavy, dusty, real. The grain has to become flour, so someone works the mill. In many places, you find the shape of Roman millstones in archaeology. Often a tall, hourglass form, a kind of stone that turns, grinding grain between surfaces. There are different ways to power it. Sometimes it's people, sometimes animals, sometimes a mix. The point is the same. Turn, press, grind. The sound is steady. Stone rubbing stone. A low, rough whisper. Flour collects in a bin. It looks soft, but it isn't clean the way modern flour is clean. It can hold grit. It can hold bits of husk. The mill does its best, but it is still stone on grain. Now water. A jar is poured into a mixing bowl. Not too much. Water is worked to fetch. You don't waste it. A pinch of salt, if there is salt. A lump of starter, if the bakery keeps one. Yeast is not a packet. It's a living thing you keep going. A bit saved from yesterday. A bit fed for today. Then the hands go in. Flour and water become paste. Paste becomes dough. Knead, fold, press, turn. It is a rhythm you can almost feel in your own arms. Press with the heel of the hand, pull back, turn the mass, press again. In a small room, you might hear nothing but this for long stretches. The soft slap of dough, the scrape of a bowl, a breath. Someone wipes sweat from the brow with the back of a wrist. Flour sticks to skin. It makes pale smudges on forearms. In Rome, baking is not always a clean, gentle craft. It is hot. It is heavy. It is fast when it needs to be fast. The oven wants fuel, charcoal, wood, whatever is brought. Someone feeds it again and again. A stick goes in. Ash drifts out. The heat bakes the face as much as it bakes the bread. You stand near it, and you feel your eyelashes warm. Now the dough rests, not for long, not always, but long enough to change. long enough to rise a little. While it rests, other work keeps going. A bench is wiped down. A basket is lined with cloth. A stack of flat trays is set near the oven mouth. The street outside keeps talking. Customers pass. Some glance in. Some step up to the counter to ask what time the loaves will be ready. And here is another rhythm, a social rhythm. Work is not only hands and tools, it is faces, it is regulars. It is the same small exchange day after day. A woman with a jar asks for yesterday's bread, if it's cheaper. A boy with a coin asks for something small. A porter asks for 2 loaves because he's feeding more than himself. The baker listens but keeps moving because the oven does not wait for conversation. Now shaping. A lump of dough is cut. It is weighed by feel or by practice or by a quick look, then rolled, folded, turned into a round. Some Roman loaves were scored into segments like a wheel. That way they break easily. You can share them without a knife. You can hand off a piece while walking. Flour dusts the surface. Hands pat the loaf. The shape holds. Then, into the oven. A long-handled tool slides under the loaf. The baker's arm disappears into heat for a moment. A quick movement. Then the loaf sits on the hot floor inside. Close the opening. Wait. Waiting is work too. You watch the fire. You listen for cracks. You feel for the shift in heat when the door opens. You learn the oven like you learn a person's moods. While the bread bakes, the bakery is still busy. Someone takes coins. Someone breaks change. Someone keeps an eye on the street. Money in Rome is small and handled often. Coins pass from hand to hand so much that the faces on them wear down. The metal turns smooth on the high points. A nose disappears first, then an eye. People talk about the emperor's face on the coin, but for most, a coin is not a portrait. It is a day's worth of choices. Bread, oil, a bit of wine, a lamp wick. In many households, the sums are tight, so bread matters, not as a symbol, as a simple comfort that can stop hunger and settle a stomach. Now, the smell changes. The loaf is done when the crust is set, when the outside darkens, when the sound, if you tap it, is hollow. Not everyone taps, but every baker knows the moment. The door opens. Heat rolls out like a wave. A face turns away. Eyes blink fast. Then the long tool slides in, and out comes bread. A row of loaves sits on a rack. Steam rises. The crust makes tiny sounds as it cools. Small cracks, soft pops. The street will smell this even if the wind is wrong. Bread is a scent that travels. It finds people. Now, here is a real Roman name connected to this trade. Marcus Vigilius Eurysaces. He was a baker, and he was proud of it. So proud that he built a large tomb near one of Rome's gates, the Porta Maggiore. It has strange round shapes carved into it that many think show parts of baking, like mixing tubs. It is a loud monument for a quiet daily job. Eurysaces lived earlier than our walk tonight, near the end of the Republic or the start of the Empire. But his tomb tells you something steady. Baking could matter enough to shape a life, to shape a memory, to be worth carving in stone. Most bakers did not build tombs like that. Most workers in Rome left no big marker behind. But the bread did. The bread is the trace, the smell, the heat, the daily need. And in this bakery, the work keeps looping. Grind, mix, knead, shape, bake, sell. It is not glamorous. It is not meant to be. It is meant to be steady. It is meant to keep people fed. Now, if we widen just a little, we can see the same looping rhythm in other jobs too. The fuller with his tubs, the potter with his wheel, the mason with his blocks, the scribe with his wax tablet, pressing letters into soft surface line by line. Rome is built out of these loops, small repeated moves, a hand reaching for a tool doing its one task well, a task done again tomorrow, and there is something quietly soothing about that, even when it is hard, because the body learns the pattern, because the mind can drift while the hands keep going. For the worker, it can feel like a trap. For the listener in bed, it can feel like a steady drumbeat, a proof that the day has shape, a proof that life, even in a big city, can still be made of small steps. In the bakery, the counter sees more coins. Hands reach in, hands pull back. A loaf changes owners. A boy runs off with bread hugged to his chest. A woman tests the weight of a loaf in her hand. A man tears off a piece before he's even out of sight. Crumbs fall, pigeons notice. A dog notices too. Work feeds even the edges of the street. And at some point, the baker's own hunger returns. Not a dramatic hunger, just the small reminder from the belly. You've been standing in heat. You've been breathing smoke. You need something simple. A piece of bread, maybe. A sip of watered wine. A bite of cheese if there is cheese. This is how the morning slides toward midday. Work does not stop all at once. It loosens. It pauses in small places. It makes room for food. And that is where we'll go next. From the heat of the oven to the warmth of a meal. From the tools on the bench to the bowl on the table. Because in Rome, as in any time, the day turns on something very plain. You work, then you eat. A loaf is torn open in the shade of a doorway. The crust gives with a dry crack. Inside the bread is softer. A little steam lifts, then disappears. For a moment, the street feels quiet. Not silent, just softened by the simple act of eating. In Rome, food is not one thing. It depends on money. It depends on luck. It depends on where you live and who you live with. But bread sits near the center of it for many people. Bread you buy, bread you carry, bread you share. A worker leans on a wall and eats with one hand. The other hand stays free for a bag, a tool, a child's wrist. Nearby, someone sells olives from a shallow basket. Dark ones, green ones, a few wrinkled ones, a little too old, but still good enough. Another stall has cheese. Not a huge wheel like a painting. Smaller pieces cut down, wrapped, weighed. The seller's fingers are slick with salt and fat. For many renters in the insulae, cooking at home is hard. A small brazier can do some work, but it also brings smoke. It brings sparks. In a tight room with wood beams and cloth, fire is always a worry. So meals often come from outside, from a bakery, from a street pot, from a shop with a counter that's built for quick trade. Rome has places where people can buy hot food ready to eat. Archaeologists often point to small street bars and snack shops in towns like Pompeii, with wide counters and jars set into them. Rome itself had its own version of this street life, even if the city is harder to dig up in one clean slice. So you can imagine a worker stopping for something warm, a ladle of stew, a handful of beans, a piece of bread with a salty topping. The food is plain, but plain is not the same as empty. Plain food still has smell. It still has comfort. If we step into a small rented room for a moment, we might see the tools of a simple meal. A clay bowl, a wooden spoon, a small pot blackened by fire, a jug for water, maybe a second jug for cheap wine. The floor is swept, but never perfect. Dust always returns, so do crumbs. A person sits on a low stool, or they sit on the edge of the bedding, or they eat standing, because there is no real table. Romans had different words for meals. Breakfast could be small. Lunch could be a quick bite. The main meal, for those who had time and means, could be later. But for many workers, the day does not leave neat spaces for formal dining. You eat when you can. You eat what you can carry. One of the oldest ordinary dishes often mentioned is a porridge made from grain. Romans called it pulse, a thick mash cooked in a pot. It can be plain. It can be made better with oil or herbs or bits of cheese if you have them. Porridge is not fancy. That's why it lasts. It fills the belly. It warms the hands. It turns a handful of grain into something that feels like a meal. Now, let's talk about taste. Because Romans cared about taste too, even when the meal was small. A common flavor in Roman cooking is fish, sauce. You might hear it called garum or liquamen. It's a salty liquid made by fermenting fish parts with salt. Strong stuff. A little goes a long way. Some fish sauce was costly, some was cheap. Quality varied, like anything sold in a city. Not every poor household had the best kind, but the idea of using a salty sauce to lift plain food makes sense, and it shows up often in Roman writing and recipes. There is a famous Roman cookbook linked with the name Apicius. It has many rich recipes meant for people with money, so it is not a menu for the average renter. Still, it shows the Roman love of salty, sour, and herbal tastes, and the way sauces could shape a dish. Most ordinary people are not eating peacock tongues or anything like that. They are eating bread and beans and greens, but they still want food to taste like something. Vinegar is another sharp taste. A splash in water makes a rough drink that can feel refreshing, not sweet, just brisk. Olive oil matters too. When you have it, it changes food. It makes porridge smoother. It makes bread feel richer. It carries herbs and salt across the tongue. And then there is wine. For many people, it is not a deep red poured into shining cups. It is cheap wine, and it is often mixed with water. Sometimes for taste, sometimes to stretch it, sometimes because very strong wine is not meant to be drunk straight in Roman custom. A cup is lifted, a small sip, not a toast, not a celebration, just a small easing of the day. Now let's imagine a meal shared, because even in a crowded city, people find ways to eat together. In a workshop, two workers might sit on a step with bread between them. One breaks off a piece. The other takes it without a word. They've done this before. In a household, a woman might feed a child first. Not as a lesson, as a habit, a practiced motion, a piece of softened bread, a little porridge cooled on the edge of a spoon. If there is meat, it is not always. Meat costs. And fresh meat depends on supply and price. But small bits can show up. A scrap of salted pork, a sausage from a stall, a bone used for flavor in a pot. Fish and shellfish also show up, especially given Rome's links to the sea and river trade. But again, it depends. The city is full of choices. Not everyone gets the same ones. Fruit can be a treat. A fig, if it's in season. A dried date. A handful of grapes. If you've ever eaten something simple in a doorway, you know the feeling. The world keeps moving, but you get a small island of time. A small pause where your hands are busy, but your mind can soften. And that's part of what meals do, even in hard lives. They draw a line in the day. Before food, after food, a small reset. If you're still with me, a quiet like helps others find this too. Now, when the meal is done, there are small rituals, not grand rituals, practical ones. A bowl is scraped clean with bread, not because it's polite, because wasting food is as foolish. A cup is rinsed with a splash of water. A cloth wipes hands. The cloth will be used again, washed later, maybe at the baths, maybe at a fountain. Crumbs are brushed off a knee. A cloak is shaken. Food leaves traces. Oil on fingers, salt on lips, a smell of smoke in hair, a little stain on a sleeve. And because food leaves traces, the body becomes part of the story. You can't eat in a city like Rome without thinking, at least a little, about washing, about sweat, about the street dust that sticks to skin. Some people will rinse at home with a small jug. Some will wait for the baths. Some will do both. So as the warmth of the meal settles, we can let our attention drift to the body itself, to cleaning and care and the odd practical habits that helped Romans feel ready to face the world. A bathhouse doorway breathes out warm air. It meets you in the street like a slow exhale. Outside, Rome keeps talking. Footsteps, vendors, a mule somewhere. But at the threshold the noise dulls. The air changes. Stone underfoot. A darker hall. A faint smell of damp plaster, warm water, and old oil. If you step inside, you're not alone. You never are in Rome. A man with a towel over his arm. A boy sent ahead with a small bundle. Someone older, moving carefully, as if the floor might argue back. At the door, there may be a keeper. In many Roman baths, the price could be small. Ancient writers mention a fee as low as a quadrans, a tiny coin. Not every bath, not every day, not every city, but the idea is steady. Bathing could be common enough to fit into ordinary life. You pass through. You give up the street. You trade dust for warmth. There is a place to set your things, a shelf, a hook, a niche in the wall. Sometimes you keep an eye on your bundle. Sometimes you pay someone to watch it. Trust is a kind of coin too. Now the body. Modern people often picture soap and bubbles. Rome is different. Not always soap. Often oil, a small flask. A little pour into the palm. Oil rubbed on arms and chest like smoothing down the day. Then comes the scraping. A curved tool called a strigil. Bronze, often. Shaped to fit the body's lines. The strigil pulls away oil and sweat and street grit. It makes a soft rasping sound on skin. Not harsh, just steady. Scrape, wipe, scrape again. Some bathhouses even had rooms linked with this step, set aside for scraping and oiling. We know the tools, and we know the habit well enough to name it. After that, water, a rinse, sometimes a basin, sometimes a dip, sometimes a pour from a ladle, then warmth again. You move through rooms that hold heat in different ways. One is mild, one is hotter. One makes you feel your skin loosen, as if it's remembering it can relax. Steam gathers in the air. Voices echo. Some people talk, some don't. A bath can be social, but it can also be private in your head. It's a place where the body becomes simple. Warmth, breath, sweat, water. And because Rome is Rome, even this calm has an edge of order. You learn how to move so you don't bump shoulders. You learn where the floor is slick. You learn when to step aside. When you leave the hot rooms, the cooler air feels sharp for a moment, like biting into an apple, a quick wake-up. Then you settle again. Now, cleanliness in Rome is not only baths, it's also fountains and cloth, and the slow, steady work of keeping things from turning sour. For clothing, many people rely on fullers. That trade we started with. Strong cleaners, scrubbing, rinsing, drying in the open air. For the body, some people wash at home with a jug, like we saw earlier. A cloth, a careful wipe, water saved. And then there are smells. Rome is close packed. Bodies are close. Work is close. Animals are close. So, Smell matters in a plain, practical way. Oil can be scented. Perfume exists in small amounts for those who can buy it. Some people rub a little into hair or beard, not to impress the world, just to feel clean enough to stand near other people. Now we come gently to teeth. Pause. We do not have a single simple picture of how Romans brushed. People did different things in different homes at different prices. But we do have hints, small tools, toothpicks, powders, rinses, and jokes. One very old joke, from the poet Catullus, makes fun of a man with teeth that are too white. The joke points to urine as a whitening rinse. It's important to hold that correctly. A joke is not a survey. It doesn't prove everyone did this daily, but it does tell us the idea was known well enough to land. And even without that, the bigger truth is simple. People cared about their mouths. They lived close together. Breath matters. Eating leaves traces. So there are small habits. A twig chewed at the end. A bit of abrasive powder. A rinse after food. Now, health. In a city like Rome, someone is always unwell. A cough that lingers. A sore eye from smoke. A cut finger from a tool. A belly that won't settle after bad food. What do? If you are poor, you rest if you can. Often you can't, so you keep working. You try simple remedies, warm water, herbs, oil, sleep, if luck allows. If you have more money, you might pay for help. A healer, a drug seller, a doctor trained in the Greek style. Rome had all of these, and the line between them can be blurry. Writers like Pliny the Elder collected home remedies and beliefs like a man filling shelves. Some of what he lists is careful. Some is hopeful. Some is frankly hard to trust. But it shows a world where people were always testing small cures against daily pain. We also know that medical writers like Galen in the 2nd century wrote in a more systematic way about the body and treatment. But even then, much of what survives comes from educated men, and not from the quiet knowledge in ordinary kitchens. So we say it plainly. Rome had medicine, Rome had remedies, Rome had care, but it also had limits. Sometimes the best treatment was simply being washed, fed, and warm. A bath, a bowl of porridge, a clean cloth, a night of sleep. And that brings us back to the bathhouse door. When you step out again, the street feels louder, the air feels cooler, your skin feels different, less sticky, less weighed down. You adjust your tunic, you tie your belt, you pick up your bundle, you check your coin pouch. You become, once again, a person moving through Rome. Not clean in a perfect way, but reset, ready enough. And there is something quietly human in that, in the effort to keep going, in the small care you give your own body, even when life is hard, because the next part of the day is not only work and food and washing, it is people, the ones you live with, the ones you lean on, the ones who know your footsteps on the stairs. So now, as the skin cools and the city takes you back, we can follow the soft thread that holds it all together. Family, friends, neighbors, bonds. A narrow stairwell at dusk holds a small pause. Two neighbors meet on the landing. One has a jar, the other has a bundle of cloth. They don't stand close. The space is tight, but people learn a careful dance. A half step aside, a nod, a few words that don't need much voice. One neighbor asks for a little water, not a bucket, just a splash, enough to rinse a bowl. The other neighbor sighs, then lifts the jar. A small pour, not generous, not mean, just real. In Rome, bonds often look like this. Not speeches, not big promises. Small favors that make a day possible. A city this crowded can feel lonely if you let it. But most people can't afford to let it. They need someone to notice them, someone to lend a hand, someone to say, quietly, "You're still here." The word family in Rome can be wider than we expect. A household is not only parents and children. It can include kin. It can include workers. It can include enslaved people. It can include free people who still keep close ties to the house. It can include lodgers renting a corner of space. Some homes are large, some are small. But even small ones can hold more than one kind of relationship at once. In an insula, a home might be a single room. Yet even there life can be shared. A couple, a child, a younger cousin sent from the countryside, an apprentice sleeping near the door. You learn to live around each other's breath, around each other's things, around each other's moods. When the day is hard, the bonds show, not in poetry, in practice. A woman mends a tear in a tunic by lamplight. Her fingers know the cloth. She doesn't look up much. The thread slides through again and again. A man comes in late. Not a rich man, not a powerful one. A man whose hands smell like work. He sits. He rubs his palm once, as if to wipe away the day. A child leans against him for a moment. No words, just wait. We don't have many diaries from ordinary Romans. The people who wrote most often were educated and wealthy. So we had to gather the everyday from scraps, from letters, from jokes, from signs on stone. One writer who helps, sometimes, is Pliny the Younger. He lived around the end of the 1st century and into the early 2nd. He wrote letters about his life, about friends, about duty, about grief, about small choices that still felt heavy. Pliny is not ordinary. He is rich. He owns land. He has status. But even in his letters, you can see something human. He worries about people he cares for. He shows kindness. He asks others to show it too. Still, for the most direct view of love and loss, we often look at tombstones. Simple markers set by roads. Names carved into stone so a person won't vanish at once. Many Roman grave markers speak in a steady, plain way. Husband to wife, parent to child, friend to friend. The words are often short, not fancy, sometimes almost blunt, but you can feel the care behind them. A name, an age, a note that someone lived well or was loved or is missed. There is a kind of tenderness in that simplicity, because stone is costly, time is costly, and still someone chose to carve a name. Now, love in Rome is shaped by law and status. Some people can marry in the full legal sense, some can't. Enslaved people, for example, could form partnerships and families, but the law did not always treat those bonds the same way. That doesn't mean the feelings weren't real. It means the world could be cruel to them. A couple might share a room and share a meal, and still have less protection than a richer pair across the street. That is part of Rome too, the closeness and the limits. But on an ordinary day, love is still made out of ordinary acts. Saving a bite of bread, sharing a cloak, holding a child's hand on a busy street, waiting up for someone who is late. Children are everywhere in Rome. You hear them in stairwells. You see them in doorways. You see them running errands with a seriousness that feels too old. Some children play. We find small toys from the Roman world, little dolls, little animals shaped in clay, knuckle bones used for games, small things that fit in a hand. But childhood is not always long or safe. Illness is common. Accidents happen. Food can spoil. Water can turn foul. Many families lose children. We know this from the number of child graves and from the quiet sorrow in inscriptions. We don't need to sit in that sadness for long. just long enough to understand why care mattered so much. A mother keeps her child close in a crowd, not from fear in the abstract, from memory, from knowing how fast life can change. In the same way, neighbors matter. In an insula, your closest help is often a few steps away. The person who hears the crash when a pot breaks, the person who smells smoke first, the person who can run for water. People share news on the stairs. Who is hiring? Who is sick? Which street is blocked by repairs? Which landlord is angry? They share tools sometimes. A knife, a needle, a small brazier for an hour. They share space at a fountain. They share the same light from the same open door. Friendship can grow in these small places. Not the grand friendship of speeches and gifts. The friendship of repeated contact. The friendship of seeing someone every day until they become part of your sense of the world. A man who works in the bakery knows the porter who buys 2 loaves. A woman who sells olives knows the same customers by their faces. A barber knows half the street by their hairline. The city is large, but daily routes are small. So the same people cross paths again and again. And that repetition can become a kind of bond. Sometimes it becomes romance. Sometimes it becomes rivalry. Often it becomes simple familiarity. A nod, a shared joke, a look that says, yes, the day is long. In Rome, there are also formal ties, patron and client, a powerful person who gives help, a less powerful person who gives respect and support in return. This system can be harsh. It can also be a safety net for some, a way to get work, a way to get protection, a way to not fall all the way. But even beyond those formal links, the real glue of life is the small care inside homes. Who cooks? Who fetches water? Who mends? Who earns? Who watches the baby while someone runs out to buy oil? We should also remember enslaved people here, because they are part of many households in this period. Some lived in wealthy homes, some worked in shops, some were hired out. Their work kept Rome running, and their lives were shaped by a system that could take away choice. Yet even in that harsh frame, people formed bonds, friendships, partnerships, small families of care. We know this again from tombstones and from scattered notes in texts. A human heart finds other human hearts, even in hard places. Now, as the day cools and shadows grow longer, the household gathers in whatever way it can. Not always everyone at once. Work schedules don't line up neatly, but people drift back one by one. Someone brings a bit of food. Someone brings gossip from the street. Someone brings worry. Someone brings tiredness. A lamp is lit. A corner of the room becomes the home corner. Not because it is marked, because that is where people sit close. And in that closeness, another kind of bond begins to show. The bond with the unseen, the little beliefs that sit in the background, the habits of prayer, the small charms by the door. So as the voices soften and the hands slow, we can let the room's attention drift toward what Romans hoped for and feared and asked for in the quiet. The household gods, the offerings, the signs in smoke and flame. A tiny flame flickers in a corner of the room. Not a big fire, just a small lamp set near a little shelf. Someone sets down a pinch of incense, or a crumb of bread, or a drop of wine. The offering is small. It fits the room. It fits the budget. It fits the quiet mood of evening. In Rome, belief is not only in temples, it is also in homes, in corners, in habits. Some households have a small shrine space, not always grand, sometimes just a painted spot on a wall with little figures. Romans often called the household spirits the lares, protectors of the home. Familiar, close, like the feeling of a doorway you pass through every day. They also spoke of the penates, spirits tied to the pantry and the store of food, to the things that keep life steady: bread, oil, salt, the simple safety of having something to eat tomorrow. Not every family used the same words in the same way. Belief is lived, not filed into neat boxes, but the shape of it is clear. The home is not only wood and brick, it is also a place with unseen care. In a small room above a shop, the shrine might be no more than a lamp, a bowl, and a habit. A person pauses before sleeping. They touch the edge of the shelf. They murmur a few words, not loud enough to be heard on the stairs. If you were to ask, "Do you truly believe this?" you might get many answers. Some would be serious, some would shrug, some would say, "Why risk it?" In a world with fire, sickness, and sudden bad luck, a small offering can feel like cheap insurance. Not the cold kind, the human kind, the kind that calms your mind. The city outside has bigger sacred places, temples, altars, sacred steps worn by thousands of feet. But even then, the prayers can be small. A quick glance at a statue while you pass. A hand lifted for a moment. A muttered wish. Roman religion, for many people, is not about long speeches. It is about doing the right act at the right time. A nod to the gods. A gift, even if tiny. A promise. The calendar is full of festivals. Days with old names and old rules. Markets change their rhythm. Public life makes room for processions or games or sacrifices. A poet named Ovid wrote a work called the Fasti, about the Roman calendar and its festivals. He tells stories about why days mattered and what people did on them. He's a poet, so he makes it smooth and meaningful. Real life is messier. Still, he shows how belief could be woven into the year like thread. For ordinary people, a festival might mean time off, or it might mean more customers, or it might mean a crowd that blocks your way home. But even if you do nothing grand, you know the day has a different feel. The city tells you, the sound tells you, the smell tells you. There is more smoke from offerings, more flowers, more noise from public shows. Now, alongside the official gods, there is also superstition, the small kind, the practical kind. In Rome, people read signs, a dream that sticks in the mind, a bird call at the wrong moment, a stumble at the threshold, a sneeze, a dropped cup. Not everyone takes it the same way, but many people notice, because noticing feels like control. And in a city where so much is out of your hands, control is soothing. Amulets are part of this, small objects worn on a cord, a charm against the evil eye, a little protection carried close to the skin. Children might wear a special charm in early life. A bulla, a small locket-like pendant, is often linked with free-born Roman boys. The details can depend on time and status, and historians still debate how widely such customs spread in practice. But the idea of protecting a child with a charm is very old and very human. Adults carry their own protections too. A ring, a carved stone, a small bundle of something tied in cloth. You don't need to talk about it. You just wear it. Belief also touches the dead, but will keep it gentle. In Rome, tombs often line the roads outside the city. You can walk past, names carved in stone as you travel. It's like a long, quiet street of memory. Some tombs are grand, many are not. But the habit of putting the dead along roads means the dead stay close to the living. You don't have to seek them out in a distant place. You pass them on the way to work. What did Romans think happened after death? There is no single answer. Some people speak of the underworld in old stories. Some speak of souls and stars. Some care less about where the dead go, and more about being remembered. A name carved into stone is a kind of afterlife, not a mystical one, a social one. It says, this person mattered enough to name. In some households, remembering the dead is part of the rhythm. A mention at a meal. A small offering on a set day. A family story told to a child who never met the person. And for people with no family or no money, the fear might not be flames or punishments. It might be being forgotten. It might be disappearing with no one to say your name. So a neighbor might help, a fellow worker, a friend from the same stairwell, someone who will make sure you are carried out and not left behind. This is not drama. It is the quiet truth of a dense city. People depend on each other even at the end. Now come back to the small shrine flame. The lamp burns low. Oil is precious. So the wick is kept short. The flame is watched. Someone leans close, shielding it with a hand. A breath is held. A small wish is formed without many words. Keep the roof steady. Keep the child well. Keep the rent from rising. Keep the boss in a fair mood. Keep the bread from running out. These are not grand prayers. They are daily ones. And daily prayers have a steady weight. Outside the sky darkens. The narrow slice of it between buildings turns deep blue, then black. The sounds shift. Vendors quiet down. Workshops close their shutters. Footsteps slow. The city begins to fold itself inward. A last offering might be made. A pinch. A drop. A pause. Then the hand reaches for the lamp, ready to carry it to the part of the room where people will rest. Belief tonight doesn't need to be argued. It only needs to be felt as part of the room. A small calm, a small order, a sense that the world, even if hard, has a pattern. And now, with the lamps lit and doors checked, the city moves toward night, toward softer voices, toward firelight, toward the slow, steady quiet that comes when Rome finally lets the day go. The street looks different at night, not because it has changed, because the light has. A lamp shines from a doorway. Another lamp glows behind a shutter crack. The rest is shadow. In Rome, night is not fully dark, not in the busy parts, but it is dim enough to make edges soft, dim enough to make the city feel older. A last vendor packs up, a basket lifted, a cloth pulled over a pot, a small knot tied tight. Wood shutters close. One, then another. The sound travels down the lane like slow knocks. Inside an insulae, a bolt slides into place. Metal on metal, a simple click. People learn to lock up, not with fear in the front of the mind, with habit, with the calm that comes from doing the same safe thing every night. A child is guided up the stairs, a hand on a shoulder, a quiet word, feet that drag a little, not from sleep yet, but from the long day. Somewhere nearby, a tavern still murmurs, not roaring, just a low pool of sound, a cup on wood, a voice that rises then falls again. But most doors are closing now, most work is done. Rome is pulling its breath in. In a small room above a shop, a lamp is set in its usual spot. The flame is small. Oil is counted in drops. The room is warmer than it was in the morning. Not much warmer, but human warmth builds up in a tight space. Bodies, breath, the faint heat left in cloth. Someone sits, not because there is a chair, for comfort, just because sitting is possible now. A bit of food might still be eaten. Something small, a crust of bread, a last olive, a sip of watered wine. If there is storytelling, it is not a performance. It is a memory shared, a scrap of gossip from the fountain, a note about a neighbor's new baby, a complaint about a boss, a laugh that is quickly covered because sound carries. Sometimes in the evening the city feels closer. The daytime crowds thin out. You see the same faces, the people who live here, not just the people passing through. A woman leans in a doorway and speaks to someone across the lane, not shouting, just letting the voice travel. A question about tomorrow, a reminder about a borrowed pot. A man comes up the stairs with a small bundle under his arm. He pauses on the landing. He listens. He decides whether to go up one more floor or stop here. The stairwell smells of smoke and damp stone. The smell is old now, part of the building, like the creak of the steps. Outside, the street has its own nightlife. Not the bright kind, the practical kind. A watchman's call may carry through some areas. We hear about night watch and fire watch in Rome. After big fires, emperors and officials tried to shape better safety. But in many neighborhoods, safety still depends on neighbors waking up, shouting, hauling water, forming a chain of hands. So night is cautious. You don't leave a lamp too close to cloth. You don't let a brazier burn while you sleep. You don't trust a loose flame. The light you use is soft. It makes everything look calm, even when it isn't. And for the person lying down, that softness helps. The day has had its noise. Now the mind wants less. In the room, someone shakes out bedding, a blanket, a cloak, a straw mattress that rustles like dry grass. The floor is hard, but it is familiar. The corner you always use becomes your corner. The wall you face becomes your wall. You hear the building settling. A beam makes a small sound. A footstep above. A cough below. Then quiet again. The lamp flame is lowered. The wick is pinched. Not all the way out yet, just smaller, because complete darkness can feel too sharp. A little light feels safer. It makes the room feel held. Outside, the sky is black, and the stars are faint in the slice you can see. Rome's smoke and lamps blur the heavens. Still, a few points of light remain. The street stones hold the day's warmth for a while. Then they cool. Slowly. A cat moves along a wall. A shadow with paws. Quiet as spilled water. A dog sighs somewhere and lies down. Even animals learn the city's rhythm. In the distance, you might hear a cart at last, moving in the hours when the streets are less crowded. A wheel's low groan, then nothing. Inside, the last talk ends, not with a clear goodbye, just with less and less sound. Someone lies down. A body turns once to find the least painful spot. A hand pulls, cloth up to the chin. Breathing slows. One breath, then another. The mind still holds pictures from the day. Bread on a counter, water in a basin, steam in the baths, faces on the stairs. But the pictures start to drift. They lose their sharp edges. They become softer shapes. The lamp is finally pinched out. A thin thread of smoke rises. The room goes dark. In the dark, the city feels far away, even though it is right there, on the other side of the wall. And now we can let the night deepen. Not with new facts, not with new noise, just with simple images, simple quiet, because Rome at night is still Rome. But it is also just a room, a breath, a blanket, a long, slow slide into sleep. The blanket is still. The room is dark. Far away, a sound fades. A last footstep. A last cup set. Down. Then even that goes. In In the dark, Rome is not marble. It is not banners. It is not speeches. It is a wall you can touch, a floor that holds the night's cool, a beam that creaks once, then settles. A person lies on their side, knees drawn a little, hands near the chest. Breath comes and goes, soft, even. Outside, the street stones cool. The day's heat leaves them slowly. Like a long sigh somewhere, water runs. Not loud, just a faint sound if you listen for it. In another room, a baby shifts, then quiet again. A dog sleeps. A cat pauses in a doorway, then slips on. The city does not end. It only lowers its voice. A small shrine in a corner holds no flame now. Only shapes. Only the memory of warmth. Names rest in stone along the road outside the city. Quiet names, kept for a while by the world. And inside this room, nothing needs to be done. No water to carry, no bread to buy, no steps to climb. Just rest, the dark, the quiet, a last image, simple and small. A single candle, somewhere in Rome, gutters low. It thins, it bends, then it's gone. Good night.